I'm Tim Constantine, and from Washington, D.C., this is the Capitol Hill Show. We're down to the final days of the U.S. presidential election, and one word describes virtually all the polls. That word is tight. Behind me is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You know it as the White House. Most would argue it's the most famous address in all of the United States. And come January, either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will be moving in. There are 7 swing states around the country that are likely to decide which one it will be. We'll talk to a Republican congressman from one of those swing states. We'll also talk to a Democrat congressman from the great state of Texas. But before we do any of that, let's take a sneak peek at each of the candidates and how they got to where they are today. Just days remain until the will of the American people will determine who the 47th President of the United States will be. Will it be former President Donald Trump, or will it be current Vice President Kamala Harris? In order to fully understand where we are as Election Day draws near, let's first look at how we got here.
We'll make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you.
We're taking a look at the election that shocked the world. Donald J. Trump, a real estate magnate and reality star with zero government or military experience, will soon be our 45th president.
Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Donald Trump wins the presidency of the United States. He is now going to be called president-elect.
Donald Trump was the surprise winner of the 2016 election over Hillary Clinton. His victory was followed by accusations, later proven to be false, that he colluded with Russia during the election. Ironically, the so-called proof turned out to be a file paid for and produced for the Clinton campaign. There was the Ukraine impeachment, there was COVID, there was the second impeachment of President Trump with absolutely no hearings.
This is what the end result is.
In 2020, Trump got more votes than he did in 2016, but less than Joe Biden. During the Biden presidency, Trump was charged in both criminal and civil court. He was charged in New York, in the District of Columbia, in Georgia, and in Florida.
Every single expert, every legal scholar, every respected scholar has said this is no case. There is no case here. This is just a political witch hunt.
During 2023, at least 10 Republicans said they intended to challenge Trump for the party's nomination for president. None of it mattered. Trump swept the field in the primaries and the caucuses. Even then, it was not all smooth sailing, as not once, but twice there were attempts to kill Donald Trump, one failing by literally a fraction of an inch. On the other side of the ballot, we had an incumbent president, Joe Biden. Biden had no meaningful opposition in the primary season and controlled virtually all of the Democrat delegates going into summer 2024. Biden's approval rating, however, was abysmal.
He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
After a disastrous and embarrassing debate performance in June, powerful players behind the scenes in the Democratic Party pushed Joe Biden out. Vice President Harris was anointed without even a single earned delegate as the party's nominee. Never before in the modern age has a major party's candidate been chosen without a single vote. She came out of the blocks strong, raising enormous sums of money and generating excitement in her party as a young, vibrant alternative to the old octogenarian president.
To our President Joe Biden. When I think about the path that we have traveled together, Joe, I am filled with gratitude. Your record is extraordinary, as history will show, and your character is inspiring And Doug and I love you and Jill and are forever thankful to you both.
On the issues, Trump has consistently beaten Harris in the polls. On the economy, people think by more than double digits that he is better suited to deal with the problems than she is. His lead over her dealing with the border is between 8 to 10 points, and on international affairs, he leads her by 6 points. But on likability, Kamala Harris jumped way ahead of the former president as soon as she announced she was in the race. The two held a debate, and most thought Harris was the clear winner.
Kamala Harris.
But then a funny thing happened.
Thank you.
The vice president couldn't seem to answer questions except with very limited, canned answers. Stiff and awkward, her numbers started to slip. And now the two appear to be in a dead heat, particularly in the 7 battleground states. We'll sit down with members of Congress from both parties, one supporting Donald Trump, one supporting Kamala Harris, and we'll get a feel for how they think things may shake out.
It's not dysfunction.
Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona is a Trump supporter. He also represents the people of a state dramatically impacted by the troubles at the border. Joining me now from the 5th Congressional District of the great state of Arizona, Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, how are you?
Great, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, the media over the past few months has spent a great deal of time telling us what Americans are most interested in. But you're on the ground, you're out there with your constituents. When you talk to real people, what's the top issue that they're worried about in this election?
In Arizona, 3 issues: inflation and the economy, which I think is one issue, together with the border security. Those really are at the top. Then you start getting to things like crime, the international disasters out there with the funding Ukraine wars instead of funding our own border, diverting money to from FEMA to border. But it's really those 3 issues: inflation, economy, and border.
Now, you have campaigned both with and for President Trump. What are your observations this year? This has been a crazy year between shootings and the Democrats changing candidates. It's been a very, very unusual year. What are your observations of him when he's out at his rallies and when he's talking to people?
Well, I mean, he's energetic, but the crowd is equally energetic. I mean, so I've been to a lot of his rallies, and I've been, with him a lot. But I will tell you that I've seen 2 of the most, excited crowds I've ever seen. And one was in Prescott, Arizona, just a little over a week ago. And then one in Glendale, Arizona, where you had 20,000 people in there. And then you probably had another 15, 20,000 outside that couldn't even get into the arena.
Well, that raises an interesting point, because every 4 years, you know this as well as I do, every 4 years we are told this is the most important election of our lifetime. How important, historically speaking, you know, you and I are in the same generation. How important is the 2024 election?
Well, I mean, this really is very different than many others. I think back to the 68 election would have been something comparable in some respects. I don't think it had the same portents as this one does. But the last time in America where you probably saw something of this magnitude was probably 1932, when you had the Depression era just evolving. And then one before that, the 1860 election, where you had this division which led to the Civil War. We are that divided, and I think that's what's driving people out from all across the board, and they see it. They know the left has just overplayed its hand, Tim, so much that it impacts everybody in this nation. So you either embrace the far left, or you're rejecting it, and that's what the election's really about.
You serve in the House of Representatives, which the Republicans control right now, but only by the number of fingers on my hand. It's not a big difference right now. And no matter who is president, having the House and the Senate makes a huge difference as to whether or not you can implement your agenda. So what do you see for the House this fall? It seems to me it's razor tight, but you probably got a better eye on it than I do.
Yeah, it is tight, and the there's been a lot of money spent by the Democrats in what where they would normally ignore districts. They're either trying to protect or they're trying to pick up. And we're also doing the same. And so I would tell you, Tim, I think when it all boils down to, I think that the Republicans in the House are going to have about a 7-seat, maybe as high as 10-seat, but probably closer to 7-seat majority. And it's going to be tight again. It's going to be really tight, and we're going to have to stay focused on the issues that you and I were just talking about.
Tight seems to be the operative word. And if you look at the polls, even, there are different pollsters, some more credible than others, but even those that tend to lean left have this thing razor thin between Vice President Harris and President Trump. What does President Trump need to say? What does he need to do in this home stretch as his closing argument to make sure that any undecided voter goes his way?
It's the same thing I think that I've been saying, and he's been saying as well, and that is this: were you better off under Trump, or were you better off under Biden-Harris? I mean, because Harris has to own it, and the reality, Tim, is she's tried to distance herself from it, but I think that's why everybody's breaking towards her. So if you're a Latino voter that you've never voted for a Republican before, you're like, well, we actually have results. I know what I was like under Donald Trump. I know what I'm like under Harris. So they can actually make the determination based on real life experience for themselves. That's why I think he closes with, you were better off under me. There was world peace under me, better economy under me. We had border security, all of those things that you want.
Very rare that we have an apples to apples comparison. We had 4 years of Trump. We had 4 years of Biden-Harris. And you can literally compare the border. You can compare the economy. You can compare international affairs. So it's an interesting approach. Final question. You are from Arizona, which is one of the swing states. What do you expect to happen in your state? Those polls look very close. I think Trump is slightly ahead in them right now. Who do you think will win Arizona?
Well, I think Donald Trump will. I think the momentum is on his side. She got a post bump here in Arizona. That's all dissipated. He is now ahead a little bit, as you say. The congressional races, I think we hold ours, and we might even pick up one seat. The Senate races, we still have a little bit of gap there, but I think there's a chance still that we can pull that out. I am cautiously bullish on Arizona, Tim, and the caution is because Maricopa County's counting apparatus and polling apparatus is always in question, but on the ground and the polling and the internals that I'm seeing really strong for us. And Trump says make it too big to rig, and that's what I keep telling people. And by the way, get to the polls. This is a turnout election. We have a 350,000 voter registration edge in Arizona. And so it is a matter of simply getting our voters to the polls. You do that, we win, up and down the ticket.
He is cautiously optimistic. It's Andy Biggs. He represents the 5th District of the great state of Arizona. Andy, thanks, my friend.
Thank you, Tim.
Congressman Al Green supports Vice President Harris. He says there are a lot of issues that matter as people decide who they're going to vote for. Al Green represents the 9th Congressional District in the great state of Texas. Congressman Green, welcome. How are you?
I am better than I deserve, and it's an honor to be back on with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for doing it. You know, just by the nature of your job, what's going on in Washington and what's going on in the House of Representatives. But you also have the good fortune of being able to circulate amongst real people, the folks that you serve back in your home district. I see polls that keep telling me what the general populace thinks is most important. But when you talk to people in your district, what issue is it that keeps coming to the top that's most important to them?
Well, there are various subsets of the district, and I think the question should be answered by addressing some of the subsets. For example, our senior citizens, a real concern for them is Medicare. As you know, Medicare is reaching a time at which it will start to diminish the payments. Well, they're very much concerned about that because a good many of them, that is the only money that they're getting. I mean, that's it. They might get a hand from one person or another, but Medicare. Now, there are persons in my district who are from various places around the world, and they bring those issues to the district. For example, there are some persons who are very much concerned about what's happening in Palestine, and they question me about that quite regularly. We also have a subset of the community that is much younger, and younger people are interested in seeing things happen that they perceive as beneficial to them. So we have to look at the subsets to get a good picture. But generally speaking, most people do concern themselves with inflation. I think inflation is something that we are still grappling with. We understand why it has occurred, and we understand that there are many of us who are trying to do the best that we can to deal with it. It has been something that older, younger, and middle-aged people all have a concern about.
We're in the last days of this year's election. Let's talk about the presidential race. Vice President Harris has been zigzagging all over the country, covering especially the swing states in Michigan and Georgia, Nevada, wherever she happens to be. When you communicate with her and with her team, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
When I talk to her team, they're excited about what they're doing. They are very confident that they are going to make great progress. And I believe that they believe, as I do, that she is going to win.
You know, we talk in terms of balance, and the House of Representatives right now is almost as close as it can be. It's 3 or 4 seats, and with the election coming, some of the polls I look at, it looks pretty favorable for the Democrats. What's your level of confidence that the House will go back blue again for January 2025?
Confident. I think there are seats in New York that we can pick up, seats in California, and I think we're going to hold our own in most of the seats that we have up, if not all. Our candidates are doing pretty good. The reports that I get indicate that they're all within striking distance. There may be 1 or 2 outliers, but generally speaking, they are. And if this is the case, I think we'll take the House back. I can't say by how much, but I do think that we'll have a new speaker. And I'm looking forward to casting a vote for a person who is now obviously the person that Democrats would want to see as speaker. All of the Democrats that I know are saying if we win, Hakeem Jeffries will become the speaker. I'm looking forward to casting my vote for him. I'm supporting him. I think he's been a good congressperson. I think he's been a good leader. I think he's very responsive. I think he listens. And I think he'll make a difference, not just for Democrats, but for both sides.
There's one question I've been asking everybody, and I got to ask you as well. Every 4 years, in my entire life, every 4 years I hear, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And so I always try to think back and put them in order of which ones really were and which ones didn't really make as much difference as we thought. But in 2024, we hear that again. So how important is the presidential election this year?
Well, we're hearing it in 2024, and we will hear it again in 2028. This is not unusual for us to hear this kind of language, but these elections are important because the question is, are you going to continue to move forward? And if you get to a pivotal point, what you see is a point wherein you may pivot and move back, then that becomes very important. So the philosophy of each candidate is important. The issues that you embrace are indicative of what your philosophy is, I think. But here's what's really important. Are you going to be a candidate for all of the people in the country? Are you going to try to pull people together as opposed to use incendiary language that might separate people? I don't want to see my country go back. I lived in a horrible time in this country when I had to go to the back door. I had to ride the back of the bus, step off the sidewalk to let people pass, literally in my lifetime. So I don't want to see us moving back. And there is a belief that if we could overturn Roe versus Wade, which was about 50 years old, that there may be some other cases that would be detriment to certain subsets of society that might be overturned as well. So I want to see us move forward. I believe in this country. I love my country. I sing the national anthem, say the Pledge of Allegiance, stand when the pledge is being recited, stand to sing. But the greatness of the country won't depend on how I behave in terms of doing these things, standing, sitting, singing. The greatness is, will I defend those who choose not to stand, who choose not to sit, who choose not to sing? And I will, because that's the greatness of America. So the greatness is in knowing that we're not all going to be the same. We can still have a great relationship. We can have unity without uniformity. Let's not try to make everybody be one and the same. Let's, out of this many, have one country that's united. And to do that, I think we have to respect each other, not call each other these names. Now, if a person is a certain thing and you've got the evidence, then you have to say that. But if you don't have that evidence, then let's try as best as we can to bring the country together. That's where I stand, and I believe that's where the next president, Kamala Harris, will stand as well.
Nick Adams understands political strategy better than most. He supports Trump, but he sees a path to victory for either candidate. Let me turn the table on you here a little bit, because I know you are a Trump supporter, but I also know you're a political strategist. You understand the game that is politics. If you were involved in the Harris campaign, in these closing days, what is it she needs to do? What's the message that she needs to get out that would convince people she's the candidate?
Tim, the number one thing I would do if I was leading Kamala Harris's campaign is I would be making an all-out play over these last 2 weeks for young men. Because I'm telling you right now, mark my words, write it down. This is the Nick Adams prediction. It is going to be that young male demographic that is going to carry President Trump over the line. They're going to be the difference this election. And she still has time, although it's very late, but she still has time to reach out to those young men with strong messaging, telling them that if she's the president, she's going to make sure that they are allowed to be ambitious, they're going to be allowed to laugh again, they're going to be allowed to be proud again, they're not going to be asked to be relegated to the back seat, to curtail their ambitions, to shelve their dreams. Young men are the most forgotten and neglected demographic, and they have registered in great numbers this time for this election.
In the state of Pennsylvania right now, record numbers are coming out as far as mail-in ballots. Same thing in Georgia, where there was great criticism that their law was going to make it more difficult for people to vote. There are actually more people than ever voting. In 2020, there were close to 160 million people voted in the United States. It looks like the number might even be more this time around. How important is voter engagement for either candidate, and does it favor one? If the numbers go higher, does it favor one or the other?
It's a very good question, Tim. Look, it obviously depends where the concentration or where that intensity of mail-in balloting is happening. Is it happening in the 7 swing states? If it's happening in California, if it's happening in New York, if it's happening in Utah, it may not mean as much. But I do think it's a reflection of people realizing just how critical, as we were speaking about earlier, this election cycle is. I would have to think that if it is a massive turnout, I would have to believe that that would favor President Trump because the enthusiasm. See, the Democrats, Tim, are all about, they've essentially now given up on joy. They've given up on all of the stuff that they were temporarily spouting. And now it's all Donald Trump is bad, Donald Trump is Hitler, Donald Trump is evil, I'm not Donald Trump, vote for me. And when you've got that kind of a message, I don't know that that's driving voters to the polls. But President Trump, this is why I think it would benefit him, his enthusiasm, the level of enthusiasm amongst his base is sky high, because they feel that they're looking at an American icon that has been subjected to the most cruel and unusual harassment by this administration, by the left, by the media. He's survived 2 assassination attempts. I mean, this is a man made to be president.
There are 7 swing states. There's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, there's North Carolina, there's Georgia, there's Nevada, and there's Arizona. And it seems to boil down to those. And when you look at the polls for those 7, and I don't care whether you're looking at a CNN poll or Rasmussen poll or a TIP poll, they all are razor thin. I think most of them have Trump ahead slightly right now, but virtually everyone within the margin of error. Final question is, what do you expect to see on that first Tuesday in November?
It does appear to be a coin toss. I don't know what's going to happen. I would not be surprised by either outcome. I would not be surprised by a Trump victory, and I would not be surprised by a Kamala Harris win.
As we wind down to the final days and hours of this long 2024 U.S. election season, we see 2 candidates nearly dead even in the battleground states. One seen as better able to solve the issues, and the other seen as much more likable. Who will win? Many believe the future of the free world hangs in the balance.